All right, Tom, you should be seeing us, right? All right, so we're set, and you got your watch party started.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, I'm good.
Okay, so it looks like everything's going. So before we get Bob on, I think we should play this video, and then we'll have Bob come on. What do you think?
I think people need to see that video.
Okay, I'm going to play it, and here we go.
Thaddeus is named after Thad Jones, a great composer, arranger, big band leader.
Then we'll have Bob come on. What do you think?
Thaddeus is named after Thad Jones, a great composer, arranger, big band leader. Thad's writing was pivotal. You know, it sort of took what Duke Ellington had done and updated it to include rhythm and blues and more contemporary jazz devices and interesting and involved harmonic structures and counterpoints and, you know, classical composition. It all was rolled into this swinging, beautiful sounding music that had such a huge impact on my writing and thinking. I actually took one of his tunes called The Groove Merchant and took the harmonic structure of that tune and built a new melody on top of that. It attempts to capture the spirit of, you know, what Thad's music was about.
All right, I cut it off.
Okay.
All right, and that was man, that was great. Tom was in the background. He was like,
I had my iPhone right up to my ear, so I wouldn't be, I guess because the mics were, I could have deactivated my mic is what I could have done.
Well,
so you mean my right.
Welcome to our show, Bob.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, guys. Great to be here. I think I detected some heavy breathing during that song.
Yes. Yeah. I was kind of doing what I always use.
Right. Exactly.
I can actually, can sing several of your solos because I've learned them well enough to sing them.
Oh my God!
I used to practice them.
My apologies.
No, it's fun. Especially the one that comes to mind is the one on Dreamland, Yellowjackets Dreamland, the one with Bobby McFerrin sings on.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that soprano solo.
Mm-hmm.
That thing's a work of art, man.
Mm.
So is Bobby's solo too, man.
Thank you.
So everybody, we got Bob Mintzer here, straight from his pad, and I guess you live in Hollywood now, right?
Yep.
In Hollywood, and you live in the old house of Stravinsky? No, who?
No, Arnold Schoenberg, a former home of Arnold Schoenberg.
That's right.
Yeah, it was actually his first residence when he moved from Boston to California. He lived here for 2 years, 1934 through 36, and he wrote several pieces here. I actually found one where he signed his name and wrote the address on the score.
Has his vibe influenced your writing?
No, but I think he's probably rolled over several times in his grave, knowing a jazzer's in his house.
So, sort of some of the people who aren't acquainted with you, because I can see we have some people. You were born in New Rochelle, right? New York?
That's correct.
And I read somewhere that you just started plunking on the piano when you were a kid, and that was a kind of thing. How'd you get started into music?
Just that very way. There was a piano in the house. I could spend countless hours just making sounds, playing chords, moving notes around, trying to learn songs that I heard on the radio or on television, and playing by ear. And it was just something that interested me for long swaths of time. And I got a lot of pleasure out of doing that. And I still enjoy doing that today.
So was it the public schools that got you playing woodwinds?
Yeah, somewhat. Actually, what happened was I wanted to be a rock and roller. I grew up, I was a kid in the 50s and listening to, the early stages of rock and roll and R&B on the radio. And I wanted to play guitar. So, when I was in grade school and they passed out the little index card and they said, write down the instrument you want to play, I wrote down guitar. But of course, guitar is not a band instrument. So they crossed out guitar and wrote clarinet because apparently they had an abundance of clarinets. So I started on the clarinet in school.
Was it a metal one?
It wasn't a metal one. It was something like plastic, I think. I don't know.
I started on a plastic clarinet.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then what happened?
I wanted to play every instrument there is, basically, from the beginning. So anytime, I had some friends that liked playing guitar, and they had guitars. So I borrowed a guitar and taught myself how to play guitar. I started playing in these little garage bands and taught myself how to play bass, play some piano. I would, transcribe songs off of recordings and, teach them to the other guys in the band, kind of thing.
And pop, was that pop music? Were you playing?
It was rock and roll, rock and roll. Jimi Hendrix, blues, B.B. King, Albert King, Muddy Waters, Beatles, Rolling Stones, you name it, all the rock and roll stuff in the 60s.
What age did you pick up a saxophone?
That would have been, I don't know, 8th, 9th grade, something. I think, it was a situation where there was a little jazz band at the school I went to, and they needed a saxophone player. So they gave me a saxophone, and I figured out how to play it and played in the jazz band,
And then how'd you end up in Interlochen? Because you must have done pretty good. You got to audition to get into Interlochen.
Well, I had studied private clarinet with a couple of good teachers, and I did an audition tape. My folks had the foresight to see I was very interested in music, and I auditioned and got a scholarship, as a clarinet student to Interlochen Arts Academy for my senior year of high school. That would have been, 69, 70. And that was a big turning point for me. It was a situation where I was surrounded by very hardworking, dedicated artists, and I got a firsthand look at, what would be involved to really get to the next several levels, and what sort of dedication was involved. And I just started hitting it.
And then from there, I believe you went to Manhattan School of Music?
I went to first Hart College of Music in Hartford, Connecticut. Oh. And I was a clarinet, got in there on a clarinet scholarship again. I played a lot of chamber music, played in the orchestra. Jackie McLean, I just started teaching there, and I got to hang with him. And there was a whole group of musicians in the greater Hartford area that had a band. It was called The Collaboration. They played every night in different clubs and restaurants. And I started following them around and eventually started working in that band a little bit. And but Jackie, after 2.5 years there, said, "You got to go to New York. That's where the scene is." So I transferred down to Manhattan School of Music in 70, I think spring semester 72, I want to say, or 73. And again, clarinet major. But I mean, that was when the loft scene was in full swing. And man,
the loft scene? I'm not familiar with that.
The loft scene. Yeah, lofts were these raw spaces, frequently very large and reasonably priced rent-wise. And there was no neighbors, right? I mean, they were typically in industrial areas. Like my first loft was on 28th Street in the Flower District. And you could play in those spaces literally 24/7.
Wow.
And there were amazing, amazing jam sessions that went on. There was a real, an infamous, I shall say, famous loft on 19th Street. Chick Corea, I think the first inhabitants were Dave Holland and Chick Corea and Dave Liebman. And then and later Mike Brecker moved into that building. It was 9th Street, just off of 7th Avenue. And Bobby Malik, I think, took Brecker's loft. This guy named Chip White, a drummer, was in there. Howie Wyeth, the guy who played keys with Dylan, lived in there. So that was, there were these sort of pockets of activity. There was another great loft down on Warren Street, way downtown. Jeff Williams, John Abercrombie, and then Mark Cohen, who became Mark Copeland. They lived in there. I spent a lot of time in there. And we would just play. We would play all night. We would just start playing, no discussion, just play, free, time, no changes, whatever. And it was wonderful. It was amazing.
I had no idea
that
existed. Holy cow.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was a key component of my training anyway. I mean, that was
kidding.
That was the age of the starving artist. I mean, in the 70s, we're talking early 70s, up to maybe into the 80s when, real estate got expensive. You could live very inexpensively in New York. There weren't very many people making a living playing jazz, so you did whatever, played weddings, bar mitzvahs, and you played an occasional jazz gig, but we were very happy and very thrilled to be sharing ideas and playing and collaborating, and that was the loft scene.
What was the first? Go ahead, Jeff.
I was just going to ask you, did you really want to play jazz, or what was your inspiration at that point?
I just wanted to play, and I was very attracted to jazz. I was smitten by John Coltrane and Sonny Rollins and Herbie Hancock and Dexter Gordon. But I also liked R&B and rock and roll. I loved classical music. I loved all kinds of music, and I just wanted to play. And I hooked up just by chance. I did a hotel gig in the Catskill Mountains, and I was put in a room with a trumpet player named John Dirth, who now lives in Charlottesville, Virginia. But he had a pad on East 9th Street, and I used to go stay with him down there. And he introduced me to Dave Holland and Richie Byrack and John Abercrombie and a lot of these guys, and started taking me around to some of the lofts. So I was very taken by that scene, and just it seemed very creative and stimulating,
Sure, yeah.
But along with that, for gigs, there were Latin gigs. There was a big Afro-Cuban scene, or salsa scene, as they say in New York in the 70s. There were a lot of dance clubs and little clubs, and there were 1 million bands. And I started playing in those bands and eventually wound up in the Tito Puente Orchestra in 1974.
Is that when you first started touring?
No, well, yeah, 74. Actually, the first gig I got where I was actually traveling was with Eumir Deodato, who, really amazing Brazilian arranger. And he had a big hit record at the time with the Strauss Zarathustra set to the disco beat.
I bought it.
Yeah. But I mean, it was a cool band, and it was, he was a great arranger. It was a little 4-horn section. And I played baritone, saxophone, and flute in that band. I also got to play some tenor. And it was great. It was, sort of my foray into the world of touring, and also, started to make some connections vis-a-vis the people I was playing with in that band and then with Tito's band. And of course, once you get into a band or multiple bands with that level of exposure, your name starts circulating, and it's sort of a small little club, and that led eventually to getting on the Buddy Rich band.
Just when I gotta, in regards to that, that's the first time I heard you. I was a freshman and going to junior college, and I don't know where we got a chart, but a chart appeared on our page called Tales of Rotor-Rat.
Oh yeah.
And I got the album, and you were playing. That's my first introduction to your playing, and I've pretty much been a fan ever since. But that was a great tune. The whole
thanks.
thing with
So
the breakdown with the flute, with the I guess did you realize that flute solo? Is it written out?
I think it was mostly written out. I mean, I got to say, in all honesty, I was a novice arranger when I wrote my first 5 or 6 big band pieces for Buddy Rich's band, which is a rather brazen undertaking. And not only that, but I would play the drums on the run through, and people hear that and they go, "What are you, nuts?" But it was Buddy didn't read music, and it was the easiest way to kind of show him what my intentions were, and just for him to then learn the tune. And it was amazing. He had this uncanny ability to hear something once and know every nuance, know the form, know every hit, almost to a fault. But it was extraordinary. It was an extraordinary opportunity to learn how to arrange for a big band.
Did you have any arranging training?
No.
Or did you play piano?
I was playing piano, but I think the key influence in terms of writing those first couple of arrangements was the fact that I had been sitting in the band on a nightly basis, and I really had the sound of a big band in my head by that time. And a lot of the arrangements were written by some of the better arrangers in the business. So I was getting to hear really finely crafted arrangements on a nightly basis. And at that point, it was, this is how we learn music, right? We learn through osmosis and listening on an ongoing basis. So it was a question of just sort of deciphering orchestrationally where the trumpets go, where the trombones go. And, I was able to approximate based on the sounds I was imagining, how to put an arrangement together. And I think I had enough musicianship to know, what an arc looks like. I mean, how to sort of write a piece that sort of evolution and, you know, a rhyme and reason to it. And I just kind of blindly went for it.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm thinking from a drummer's standpoint, what was it like? Because Buddy was such a driving force when he played. He really pushed. And I'm thinking this only because your next band was Mel Lewis, right? The difference between the way those two guys played.
Yeah, it was different, but it was, I mean, both great. You know, I mean, Buddy played up on top. He, like you say, he pushed. Mel was far more relaxed. He sort of was in the middle of the beat, a little more. Both great. I appreciated both situations, and I think I learned a lot from both.
So what happened then? This is like the late 70s.
Late 70s, yeah. I got on Buddy's band in 75, stayed till spring 77, joined Thad Mel 78, I think summer 78.
Jocko was in there somewhere.
Jocko 81, 82.
Okay.
But I mean, I was in New York. I started doing some Broadway show subs. I used to sub at Grease. Really? And man, that was the loosest show one could imagine. I mean, it was like a rock and roll show, right? And it was, the drugs and drinking was all in full swing, and it was so loose that there was a percussionist who stopped showing up. He didn't show up for a month until somebody realized, hey, where's Mike? You know, I mean, it was so incredibly loose,
and he was getting paid.
Yeah. So, but I mean, it was, and it was really fun. I mean, Sal Nistico, I met Sal Nistico in there. He used to sub. My good friend Pete Yellen used to sub there. So some jazz guys would come in and sub. I mean, it was a rock and roll. There were 2 rock and roll tenor chairs. So started doing that and started playing around town. I was in a 12-piece band with Sam Jones and Tom Harrell, and did some playing with Joe Chambers, a drummer, and with Ray Mantilla, and one thing and another. Did some playing with Mike Minieri. Work with Randy Brecker a little bit. I mean, it's just doing what we do around town in New York. And
you were kind of there, kind of one of kind of the last best time in New York. It seems like you were there.
Yeah, it was maybe. There was. The studio scene was hopping. I mean, it had been busier earlier, but in the 70s into the 80s, it was jumping pretty hard. And
did you do a lot of pop sessions?
I did quite a few. Actually, my association with Randy Brecker was such that I got a lot of calls. We worked with Arif Mardin quite a lot.
Wow.
Played on a bunch of pop. Played on, Diana Ross, Lou Rawls, some of the, singing group Temptations, the Stylistics, Spinners, Commodores. I played on one of their tracks. It was session work, and it was really fun and inspiring. The level of musicianship was very high, and it was great.
Were the rhythm section guys at that time were like Steve Gadd and Richard?
Yeah,
those kinds of guys?
Yep.
Man.
Yeah, I did a jingle once. I'll never forget this. It was Steve Gadd and Richard T. and Gordon Edwards, and the horn section was me and Randy and Dave Sanborn, and Richard T. and Gadd. They were buddies, and we took a break, and they walked out, and they never came back. So that was the end. That was the end of the jingle. But it was like, damn, man, I wish we could play that. It was so funky. It was so great, But there was definitely some looseness back then.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Did you run into Mitch Foreman at all?
Yeah, he was around. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was good buddies with Chuck Lowe. I was friendly with a guitar player, and did some playing together. Yeah.
It's funny, I was talking to David Sanborn. I know David a bit, and I was talking about he was talking about the change of the session scene there, and he said he knew he was in trouble when he went maybe 10 years ago. He said he went to a session, and he looked at they had sheet music there, and it said, so where the solo was, it said Sanborn-esque.
Right.
And he's going like, didn't they know who they were hiring to play this solo?
Yeah. I remember Dave once said to me, he was very concerned because he had become a parody of himself.
He said that to me once too.
Yeah. I mean, and I understand it. That the paradigm for sax solos at one time was play like Mike Brecker or Dave Sanborn.
Yeah.
And I think in great part, I learned. I was hanging out with Mike, and I was very, very much enamored of his playing expertise, and I tried to imitate him like I imitated many others. And at one point sounded quite a lot like him, and part of it was that was what was called for, to do a lot of these sessions where you were playing a saxophone solo and stuff. But of course, the remedy for all that is to just do a very broad, listening of the various players in the history of the tenor saxophone, and then you're not going to sound like any one of them, because you'll have a sort of well-distributed overview of how to play the instrument.
Go ahead, Jeff.
No, I was just going to say, while you're talking, I'm looking at all of the albums you've done since. What we've talked about so far is up till about 1984, and you're in the 80s. You started doing a bunch of your own records.
Oh yeah, well, let's see. I did my first 2 records for Pony Canyon in Japan. That would have been 1979 and 80. One was called Horn Man, and one was called The Source. And again, I was like a kid in a candy shop. I hired like all the top New York session guys and my friends, Will Lee and Don Grolnick and John Tropez, and Peter Erskine played on a bunch of tunes, and wrote some horn section stuff, did some multi-tracking of woodwinds, and just stretched out, and did sort of, I don't know what style you would even call it. There was some vocal stuff on those records. And then I did a big band record. My first big band recording actually was for CBS Sony in Japan. And Dave Sanborn was the lead alto player in the sax section on that record. And Mike Brecker was in the section. The band was the cream of the cream. It was pretty insane.
What was the name of that album?
That was called Papa Lips.
Okay.
Yeah, it was on the CBS Sony label. I think re-released on Toshiba EMI, maybe as a CD. And the band was, the cream. And it was a funny scene because that band really started at a club called 7th Avenue South that Mike and Randy Brecker owned. And we would play in there, and, they would advertise all the personnel: Mike Brecker, Dave Sanborn, Randy Brecker, Don Grolnick, Peter Erskine, Will Lee, Lou Soloff, Marvin Stamm, Barry Rogers. And the line would be out the door around the block, and people would come in there and say, "Wow, what a band. Who the hell is Bob Mintzer?" And then that morphed into, if Sanborn was like on the road or something, people would become irate. They'd come in and go, "Hey, where's Dave Sanborn?" It's like, I don't know. You got Mike Brecker. What do you want? So anyway, it kind of started there, and just by luck or by chance, there was a fellow named Tom Jung who started one of the first compact disc labels, and it was a high-end audiophile label called DMP, Digital Music Products. Mm-hmm. And he came out one night, and he was going to look at 3 different bands: Mel's band up at the Vanguard, Ed Palermo's band that was playing somewhere else, and my band that was at 7th Avenue South. And he came to hear our band. We sat down and talked. We hit it off. He liked what he heard, and that started a 25-year history of making CDs for a label, which was amazing. Again, another amazing opportunity.
2 things. I bought a bunch of those early CDs, man. Mm-hmm. I had them all, and I've been trying to find them. I want to have them back again.
Yeah, they're all out of print, but every note is on YouTube. So, it's not going to be the same fidelity, but
yeah,
that's the way it is.
Is any of that stuff on a streaming service?
No.
No.
Nope.
We have a question. Somebody texted. tell the story of being in a large record media store in Japan and seeing yourself on the big screen. Did that happen to you?
I'm sure it did. I don't remember it, but more. I mean, the funny thing was, I can't show you the picture. We were playing in Shanghai with the Yellowjackets, and I was out walking around, and I look up, and there was a billboard. I swear to you, it must have been 100 feet tall and 200 feet wide of the Yellowjackets. I mean. and I would just stop dead in my tracks. I took a picture of it, but it's like, wow, that's pretty far out.
Hey, wouldn't it be nice if musicians were looked at in the same perspective in the United States?
I think some are. I don't know. I think there's always that aspect of, if you're from another country, there's some exotic component. I don't know. I think people in Europe overlook some European musicians, and they sort of revere the New York jazz guys, but it's not really commensurate with one's ability or, the validity of their art. It's just maybe human nature. I don't know.
So how does an East Coast guy get in a quartet from the West Coast?
Yeah.
How did that hook up with Russell and Jimmy and was it Will Kennedy at the time?
Yes. It was just a confluence of events. I played, I was in two different situations, one in Aruba with Michael Frank's band, and the Yellowjackets were supposed to play before us. Their equipment didn't show up, so they were hanging around, and they got to hear me play, and we got to hang out a little bit. And then a little while later, we were in Greeley, Colorado, northern Colorado, and I was the guest artist with the school big band, and they played either before or after. And again, we sort of had an encounter and talked. And then their saxophone player, Mark Russo, moved on. And I think Jimmy already knew, they all knew of me from having played with Jocko and one thing and another. So they thought, let's get a tenor player. And so my name came up. I was probably one of several. And I think one of the selling points may have been that not only did I play the tenor saxophone, but I played all the doubles, flutes, clarinet, saxophones, and was an arranger and a composer, and played in a wide swath of different styles, which is really what the Yellowjackets situation calls for.
Yeah, they really morphed into that from the first album, which was a fusion album with no saxophone.
Yeah,
and Robin Ford. Yeah,
yeah. It's interesting. The prior to me joining the band, the Yellowjackets had a 10-year history, and they were misconstrued frequently by jazz purists, if you will, as being some sort of, pop band or something. But that was really missing the point. If you were to dig deeper on all of those records, there was a lot of subtlety and character in those compositions and arrangements, and the playing was great, of course.
Absolutely.
But yes, it had a certain tone to it that was commensurate with that time period, but the craftsmanship was extraordinary from record one.
Absolutely. I still love listening to that record.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great compositions.
Yep.
And somewhere along there, you did an album called Twin Tenors.
That's right.
Where was that? Was early 90s?
Somewhere in the 90s, yeah. So what happened was, I sort of had these different spheres of activity. The Yellowjackets was one. I was making small band records of my own.
Yeah.
And a producer from Japan that had to hook up with BMG Japan and asked if I wanted to do a project. And I thought it'd be fun to do something with another saxophone player. I'd initially asked Jackie McLean, but he was too busy. And I thought, Michael Brecker was a good friend, and I asked him if he'd want to do it, and he was interested. So we did this little side project. It was done quickly in a couple of afternoons, and hence Twin Tenors was born.
Yeah, but that for all us tenor players, that was a pretty big deal when that album came out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was an interesting experience. You know, it was the challenging part of doing that project was to be Mike Brecker's foil, to not, you know, not try to outnote him or outplay him, but to sort of find a slot that complemented what he did. And,
Both your solo, and I think he was trying to do the same with you.
yeah,
I think,
absolutely.
yeah.
You know,
I mean,
yeah.
solos. I just felt the way you guys interacted on that album was brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, we have disparate styles, always did, and I thought they fit together fairly well.
Yeah, they did. I'm going to listen to it, I think, later on tonight.
Okay.
Put it back on again.
When would be a good time to play the other video?
Yeah, let's play it now. I did a big band record. I was, after the 20 some odd years at DMP, I moved over to yet another 3-letter record label. I was on several. GRP is another one. But this one was MCG, the Manchester Craftsmen's Guild. And again, just by chance, the Yellowjackets played a concert there. They had this wonderful concert series. You'd go in and play 4 nights, and they had a recording situation, and you could make a record there, a live record. And so I thought, wow, this would be a great venue for my big band. And I talked it over with Marty Ashby, and he agreed. And so I started recording for them. I made 6 CDs for them. And one of the last ones, well, the very last one was done with the New York Voices. But the one before that was called Get Up. And I always wanted to do an R&B flavored big band record, you know. And Tom, you know, your band, Tower Power, was certainly a major influence. Just the whole Oakland thing was something that was a huge part of my musical thinking. And actually, there's a tune on there called The Land of Oak. Actually, is that the tune? No, the one we're going to play is called, the working title was Funky Fast. It became Truth Spoken Here. But it was Will Lee on bass, Will Kennedy on drums, Ray Obiedo, another Bay Area guy, and Russ Ferrante on piano, and the New York Horn guys. Yeah, could we play that now?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Thank you all for being here. We're going to play one last tune. This is it's called Funky Fast.
Wow. That was fun. Woo.
Pretty good band, eh?
Yeah. Man. Woo.
So I have to say, that was something I dreamed of doing. You know, it had to be those exact people, and it was an amazing experience. You know, it was something I planned and realized came to realize with the people, the exact people I knew would do the best job. And man, I'm so proud of that recording.
Yep.
So we had Bob Malik there on second tenor, and
Yep.
Bob Shepard playing lead.
Yep.
Was that Roger
Rosenberg on Barry?
on Barry? Who was on
Roger
second?
Rosenberg. Let's see. Who was playing? God. Lawrence Feldman played second.
Oh, that okay. Yeah. I don't know what he looked. And who was who played the trumpet solo?
That was Scott Wenholt, who he plays in the Vanguard Orchestra. He's a beautiful player.
Beautiful player, yeah.
I've been working with those guys for years. All of those horn players. I mean, they've been on most of my big band records.
Yeah. You know, I have to give kudos to how well that was recorded and mixed. On live recording, that was a really sparklingly clean recording.
So the kudos go to yours truly, who mixed it, but also with Rich Breen, who was the engineer. He and I spent a week mixing that record, and Rich Breen he does all the Yellowjackets recordings. He's a wonderful, wonderful engineer.
So let's talk about your brother Ricky Peterson's been watching on my feed. He's commented a couple times. You just did an album with him, right?
We did at the WDR. Yeah, beautiful album.
Yeah. So which I've listened to. I love that album.
Yeah.
So have you worked with Ricky before?
I just in passing we've met, you know, and had never played with him before that.
But you wrote to feature his B3 playing, right?
Well, yeah, actually, it's a long story, but there was Joachim Becker was the producer who worked that project with us, and somebody else was supposed to do it, you know, with the guest of the band, and that it fell through, and Ricky was brought in kind of in the 11th hour with a wonderful band, Gene Lake on drums, and Ricky's brother Paul on bass, and Bruno, I forget his last name, on guitar, a German guitar player, and man, it was a blast. I loved the material, and it was fun to arrange and fun to do the recording. Yeah.
Do you guys mind if I put up the phone number in case anyone has questions?
No, of course not.
Good questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. What kind of mouthpiece you play on, Bob? I think it's a Gregory, right?
No, I did play those. A guy named Rafael Navarro made this mouthpiece.
You're in Navarro now,
yeah,
okay?
Yeah, I've been playing that for a long time. And an Eastman tenor saxophone. That was an eye opener for me to switch to the Eastmans. They're beautiful horns. I love those horns.
You're gonna have to play one someday, yeah.
They're good for me. I mean, you know, everybody, it's a very personal thing, but those horns, you pick it up, it immediately feels great. They tune well. There was something about the sound that was very attractive to me. And most importantly, I hear myself well on those horns, far better than on my old vintage Mark 6s.
So are those just sitting in the closet now?
They are.
You want to sell me one of them?
Actually, on the Thaddeus record, that's a gold-plated early Mark 6. It's a beautiful horn, but I'm staying with the Eastman. I feel most comfortable on that horn.
Well, I'm first in line if you ever want to let one of those go.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't do that.
I probably know you would.
Yeah. But anyway, I'll keep you in mind.
Okay.
Can I ask you guys this is going to be a dumb question. So you know how guitar players like to collect guitars? Do you guys do that with horns? Do you collect?
Not me. No.
They're too expensive.
Yeah. Actually, all the horns I have, there's a story involved. That gold-plated horn belonged to a student of mine from Manhattan School of Music who passed away. So I mean that horn really is dear to my heart. I don't think I'll ever let it go.
No.
And I have one other Mark VI. That one, there was a story with that one too. An elderly gentleman called me up who was a fan and said, "I'm too old to play. You know, I'm a fan of yours for a long time. I'd love to sell you this horn." And I was just so touched. I bought the horn and I played it for a while just for the sentimental value. That's another one I'll just probably hold on to.
Do you ever pick up the alto?
No, I'm not. I live in the land of B flat.
Okay.
Period. You know?
Well, you played Barry for a minute.
I did. I played alto. I have an alto, but I'm most at home on the tenor, some soprano, bass clarinet I like to play, and electronic wind instrument.
It sounds great on clarinet too. You can put that on several Yellowjackets albums.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was forced. I was at gunpoint. Forced to play the pain stick, as we call it. But I think I'm most at home on the bass clarinet. I used to really enjoy playing that with Jocko's band. I think there's some pretty good representations of my bass clarinet playing on those videos.
Mm-hmm.
How about flute? Do you ever play flute much?
I do. I studied flute. I used to practice every day. I don't play it so much now, but I can pick it up. In fact, the Yellowjackets just did a new recording that's going to be out in November on Mack Avenue with the WDR band. And there was a tune Russ wrote. There was somebody got sick in the reed section, and there really wasn't a good flute player. So I wound up triple tracking all the flute parts on this one tune, so I still had it, but my chops went pretty quickly because I don't practice. But I at one time I was doing a fair amount of studio work and playing the flute a lot. So
is right now currently, because a lot of stuff is shut down, are you able to do any kind of remote recording for?
Yeah, I'm doing some. I did something in Paris. There's a group of guys I worked with over there. They had this big band called the Paris Jazz Big Band, some really amazing musicians, and I did something with them. Some guy in Brazil wants me to play on a couple of tracks. It's sort of the way of the world now, and why not?
Yeah. Do you have any students, any private students?
Yeah, I have a few.
Doing Zoom lessons and that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I did a workshop in the UK this morning with, it was, I don't know, there's a series that I was asked to be a part of, and that was kind of fun.
Yeah. What are your thoughts about rephasing in? What does your gut tell you? Next year's for us, probably?
I don't know. I haven't a clue. I think I don't know. I mean, there's so many unknowns. I do think, if you look at Europe, they jumped on this thing very quickly, and consequently, there's a lot less cases. And I think there was a lot more unity in terms of, a plan to squash this thing. Mm-hmm. It's really unfortunate that we're not able to do that in this country. Yeah. And it's really going to hold back the whole world. It's really, it's a pity, actually.
And you're teaching at USC too. We were talking a little bit before we went live. We were talking that they don't really know what they're going to do there either. Huh?
I think many universities have just opted to go fully online so as to not avoid problems. USC, I think, realizes the importance of in-person collaboration and playing, but it all has to be organized under the guise of safety. And that's a real challenge, particularly when it comes to wind instrument playing and vocalizing, because those are the big perpetrators of spread, So we're trying to work things out now. It's really a challenge.
Yeah, if you're the droplets, the moisture droplets, if you're a wind player, are just all over the place.
Right.
Yeah.
Or horn players in general, right? There's a lot of.
Yeah, you see us spraying, we call it, if you're in front of the tower horn section, we call it the spit zone.
Yeah, exactly. And singers in particular, singers, a lot of saliva flying around. For that matter, somebody giving a political speech is spitting all over their followers.
That's true.
I don't know. I don't think I'll be going to any political rallies anytime soon.
Yeah. So it gives you a lot of time to write, though, right? You said
I've been writing. Yeah, I've been writing. I've been working on a WDR project for 4 tenor players, Bobby Malik being one of them, Otto Rovati, Randy Brecker's wife, a very fine saxophonist,
Yeah.
Paul Heller, the tenor player in the WDR, and myself. And I'm having a ball. I'm writing for that. There's going to be subsequent WDR projects when things open up there. So there's plenty to do. I think the challenge with this whole pandemic thing is to rethink, the way you do things, and look for things to do that are within the realm of what's safe, and stay productive, keep moving.
Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt, but I don't know if you heard that Andy Griffith theme song, but that's my ringtone, and somebody just called in.
Okay, let's see what we got.
Okay, hello.
Hey, it's Cha-Cha calling from New Jersey, guys. How are you?
Good.
New Jersey. What?
New Jersey, Philadelphia area.
Cha-Cha had COVID-19 and got better.
Really?
Is that right?
Yeah, I'm not completely better, but the COVID virus is gone. I had my follow-up measles swab, so it's all gone from my body, but I have a lot of follow-up symptoms. But I'm hopeful I'll be okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Glad to hear that.
Go ahead.
What's your question?
My question is, I'm a big fan of Bob's over the years. I'm a big horn fan. I'm a big Brecker Brothers fan and Barry Rogers. And I was just wondering, I love listening to your stories tonight and all the collaborations you've had over the years. I'm just curious, who has been your favorite musician that you've collaborated with?
Oh, good question.
That's a hard question to answer. I've had so many wonderful collaborations. It would be hard to choose one. They've all been amazing, and it would be hard to single out one. I've been blessed with the opportunity to play with great musicians and great bands for 45 years. I don't know that I could single out any one. I think they've all contributed to this amazing, experience.
Has there been anyone that you haven't performed with that you wanted to?
No. Actually, maybe. I didn't get to directly play in Miles Davis's band, although I was in the Mel Lewis Jazz Orchestra, and Miles came into the Vanguard on a Monday night and sat in with the band. I don't know if you consider me playing with him in that setting, but I was sitting there and he was playing right behind me. But it would have been interesting to play in Miles' band. But you know what? I played in a lot of other great bands. I have no regrets, really. I'm thrilled with everything I got to do. Let's put it that way.
Hey, Cha-Cha, did you guys? She wanted to know who the trumpet soloist is. Did you answer that question already? And I wasn't paying attention.
I will answer it again. That was Scott Wenholt on the trumpet.
Yes.
Okay.
He was amazing. I'm not too familiar with him, but I'm going to look him up.
Yeah, he plays in the Vanguard Orchestra, which is the aftermath of the Thad Jones Mel Lewis Big Band. They still play every Monday night at the Village Vanguard.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, thanks for taking my call. Have a great night.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Cha-Cha.
Thank you.
Bye. See ya.
I finally got to hear the Vanguard Orchestra back in, was it September, October? Went and heard them, and Tom Harrell was the guest soloist. So it was nice. Yeah, I remember hearing Tom when he was living in the Bay Area. You could hear him a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And then he was with Horace Silver, and I heard him,
Yeah. I worked with Tom a lot. I played in his quintet several times. He played in my big band a bunch. And he had that band, a 12-piece band with Sam Jones. And I was in that band for over a year. We had a steady, I think, Tuesday night gig at a place called Gulliver's in New Jersey. And that was an interesting band.
Yeah. Had you ever wanted, especially in the 70s, to get the Horace Silver gig or the Art Blakey gig?
I auditioned for Horace Silver, and I didn't make it. But I have a story about Art Blakey. I went and sat in with Art's band at the Vanguard on a Sunday night, and he he actually gave me the gig that night, but I was still on the Buddy Rich band and was going to record a couple of my first 3 big band charts. And I said, if you could wait a couple of months, I'd love to join your band, but he didn't wait. But I played a week at the Village Gate with the band, and he recorded a couple of my tunes. So I had a little encounter with Art.
What was he like to work with?
He was beautiful. I mean, it was just an amazing sensation to play with Art.
Because I heard him so many times at a place called the Keystone Corner in San Francisco. You could get this Keystone card, which was a punch card, and I could afford it. You know, my gig, and Art Blakey would come, and I'd go 3 nights in a row. Dexter Gordon would come, and anytime Art Blakey, Horace Silver, Dexter Gordon, or McCoy Tyner, a couple of basically. I was up there every weekend. Every weekend I was up there for like 3 or 4 years.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, great club.
Todd Barkin. Did he moved back to New York? Does he have a club there now?
He was working at Lincoln Center, Jazz at Lincoln Center. I'm not sure if he still is, but he was at one time. Oh, you know what? He is involved with a place in Baltimore. I think maybe it was called Keystone Corner even. I don't know. They opened up a really nice club, so I hear, in the Baltimore area. Yeah. Actually, as I recall, Elvin Jones called me twice to play with his band, but it was like, can you leave in the morning for London? And I couldn't. So that was, again, 2 missed opportunities.
Elvin Jones, man.
Yeah. I mean, those were the gigs that every tenor player wanted, right?
Mm-hmm.
Blakey, Elvin, or Horace. And I missed all 3. But like I said, I mean, I got to do other things. I mean, the whole big band thing was a total fluke. I wasn't interested in pursuing that. I had played in several big bands. I wanted to play in a small group as a tenor player. As we know, that's the epitome, right? You get to play.
Yeah.
But this big band thing kind of fell out of the sky, sprouted legs, and started running. So I figured, do what's in front of me.
Well, the nice thing is you can write your tenor solos into your own charts.
You got that right, baby. I was the second tenor player on Buddy's band. I got to play 1 solo a night on West Side Story. It was the most depressing solo imaginable. Half of it was written out, and I thought, when I started writing, I'm going to write a second tenor solo in every chart I write. And that's exactly what I did.
Hello, we have another phone call. Hello?
Hello?
Yes.
Hi, Bob. This is Pat Belleville calling from Calgary, Canada.
Hey, Pat. How you doing? Wow, long time.
Good. How's it going?
It's going well. Man, blast from the past.
I just wanted to phone in and say it's been so good to hear you talk and hear your stories and stuff like that. And Tom, thank you for doing this.
Hey, Jeff.
And after this COVID thing is done, I want to contact you about maybe coming up here again and doing some things here like you did before.
Okay. Let's keep in touch. Pat, he's a real advocate for this music. He organizes things up in Canada. He's a terrific musician and a great guy. I miss you, Pat, and thanks for all you do.
Sure, thank you. It was a pleasure to have you, and I want to get you back here whenever it can be possible.
That's if they'll let Americans into your country.
Yeah.
Hopefully that'll happen one day.
We'll see how that goes.
I'm not sure if they should, between you and me.
Yeah.
But, we'll see.
Are we talking Toronto here?
No, west, right?
Vancouver?
Calgary.
Yeah.
We haven't had Tower of Power up here in ages, so there's another thing I want to address.
There you go.
And I've never been to Calgary. So
I saw you guys at NAMM, Tom, and it was awesome seeing you on the outdoor stage there. That was excellent.
That was a really incredible gig, that whole NAMM show.
Wow. Yeah, Tower of Power. That's one of my favorite bands.
I just wanted to phone in and say that it's great to hear you guys talking. And Bob, you've been on my mind for a little while here. I'm working at a university here, and I think they would go nuts to have you up here. So,
wow. Well,
anyway,
thank you so much.
And
good to hear your voice.
You have to say.
Thank you so much.
All right.
You're welcome.
Oh.
Good night.
Well,
thanks, Pat.
I love that. I love those kinds of calls.
Yeah, he's a good guy. I was up there a couple of times.
I want to ask a question from a rhythm section point of view. What's your favorite? Do you have a favorite rhythm section that you like working with?
Yeah, the guys I play with. I mean, did you all? I mean, just let's talk about Peter Erskine for a minute. You know, I met him 50 years ago. We went to Interlochen Arts Academy together, and we've been playing together ever since. We both teach at USC now. We play on each other's projects. And did you hear the way he played?
Yes.
That is some tasteful drumming, I got to say, man. You know, he's understated, but he's very present. He's supportive. He doesn't overpower. The interaction is just beautiful, and his sound is beautiful. You know, that he's really the paradigm in terms of the kind of drummer I like to play with. I mean, I love playing with William Kennedy, another one, you know. Just play what you need, nothing more. He leaves room for the music to grow. Mel Lewis, very same kind of drummer. You know, Buddy Rich, a different kind of drummer, but also, you know, very, very in the music, very interactive. Gosh, you know.
Do you remember the last time you guys played at Jazz Alley and I was there to hear you guys?
Yes, I do remember. Yeah.
And Jeff will like this, and I know Will a little bit. And Will had his, what did he do? He had his snare facing out, and he said he had his drums all at a weird angles. And I go like, so what's up with this? And he just goes, I don't know, I'm just trying something different.
Yeah. Every night he sets up his drums different. Like
it's so weird.
The cymbals were facing out.
Yeah, they're facing out.
So like I thought, you know, maybe the audience could come up and like play a little ride cymbal beat, you know, or something.
Wow.
But I admire that, you know, he just change it up every night, try something different, you know.
And it didn't affect his playing.
No.
No, it's just, I mean, he's just.
Yeah. Will, he has the biggest beat, but it's not loud, you know, it's right where it's supposed to be. And, you know, as a saxophone player, we're very cognizant of drummers, you know. The last thing a saxophone player needs is a drummer that plays too loud, because it just damages your ability to hear and feel your sound and the overtones, and it's not a conversation. It, you know, turns into a battle.
Yeah.
And, you know, the guys I play with, they're conversationalists. That's a key ingredient in any musician, actually.
Yeah, and listening's.
Yep.
You know, creates the conversation.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's just, I know with with my mix and tower, I have the rhythm section real hot in my in-ears, and I have to have in-ears. I wish I didn't have to have them, but
yeah.
But, you know, Chacha asked a question that made me thought of another question. Is there any particular gig in your history that just sticks out because of the interaction and how the audience reacted to the tune that just pops up in your mind? Because I have gigs like that I just always never forget that gig.
Yeah.
So you have any gigs like that pop up?
Yeah, many. I mean, you know, I've spent 30 years with the Yellowjackets. There were some amazing nights. I mean, one in particular, there were several at the North Sea Jazz Festival when it was in The Hague. We used to play. We played every year in that like airplane hangar room. There'd be 15,000 people in there. I'm sure you guys played in there. I think maybe Norbert was in the band when it was in The Hague. I don't know. Did you ever play The Hague?
I did one gig at The Hague, and then it moved back to Rotterdam.
Yeah. Anyway, we were in that room, and the band was just on fire this one night, and I just remember the crowd went crazy. And after we got off the stage, Dave Sanborn, he was supposed to follow us. He was pissed off, and he came over and he got in my ear. He said, "Hey man, fuck you." That was one memorable. Another memorable night at North Sea was we did something with the Metropole Orchestra and the Yellowjackets. In fact, you can find that video on YouTube. That was a sensational concert. Again, a lot of people, and Vince Mendoza did some arranging. I did some arranging, and the band was really in top form, and some really extraordinary music happened that day.
Here's a good question from my friend John J. Carlson. He goes, Bob, how about the story that's on video of playing Mr. Phone Bone with Jocko, where Jocko took took off to get a bite to eat just before you guys went on, and then left you all out there playing the tune with no bass.
Yeah, I think he got on a flight to New York or something from Montreal, and we were supposed to play like a short intro and then launch into the tune. Well, the intro went on for seemingly ever, and Jaco eventually showed up, but it's all on the video, which I guess
I haven't seen it. I'm gonna have to find that.
Yeah, it was. You'll see. I mean, not only the playing kind of meandered, but sort of the expressions on our face was consternation. Like, what the hell is going on here? You know?
Did the keyboard player start playing bass lines?
There was no keyboard player, but Jaco showed up, and he had some kind of synthesizer on the stage. And so he showed up and was like, finally, right? So now we can start the tune. But instead of picking up the bass, he went over and started noodling on the keyboard. And as the story goes, Randy Brecker went over and sort of grabbed him by the scruff of the neck and said, pick up the bass, man. And so we eventually launched into the tune. And I really have nothing to complain about, because what was going to be a 6-minute tune turned into an 11-minute tune. And my publishing royalties were far greater as a result.
Was Jaco just kind of loaded out of his mind that night?
God only knows. You know, he had some challenges for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's so sad.
It was sad. It was a drag, and it was sad. It was sad to watch such an extraordinary musician. But
so
that's the way it goes.
You know the story about Jaco sitting with Tower?
No, but okay. I'm afraid to hear it.
Well, they were playing at the bottom line, and Jaco came by. You know, he's a big fan of Rocco's playing, and they let him sit in the one night, right? And he just sort of took over the show. It's like he wouldn't stop soloing and playing.
Yeah. Oh,
he finally had, and so the next night he came by again, and the road manager said, "You can't let that guy in. You can't let him in."
Yeah. It was sad story.
But boy, man, just what he contributed to the music scene.
That's really the thing.
It's really just so much beautiful music and compositions and.
Absolutely.
That 3 Views to a Secret, that's his composition too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who did the arranging of that big band tune? Is that you?
No, that was a guy, as far as I know, named Larry Warlow, who did a lot of orchestrating for Jaco and never really got his just due. Larry did the bulk of those large ensemble arrangements. He passed on a few years ago, but just a very humble, super talented orchestrator. And I got friendly with him when we were traveling around doing some of the big band gigs.
You were on the birthday concert.
I was,
right?
Yeah.
But were you on the studio recording of 3 Views of a Secret?
No, that was on the Word of Mouth record, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I started with Jaco just right after that was recorded.
Yeah.
But that was a really interesting recording. Yeah, I remember showing up at Power Station Studio just after they had done the rhythm track to Liberty City. So that was Herbie and DeJohnette and Bobby Thomas Jr. and Jaco. And man, I had never heard anything quite like that. It was just something very fresh and unique sounding.
It still is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Who are your favorite arrangers that kind of you just go like, kind of spur your?
Thad Jones for sure. Gil Evans. Klaus Ogerman, Bill Holman. Oh gosh. Ymir Deodato was a beautiful arranger. Gosh, there's so many.
Do you interact with at USC? Do you get much interaction with Vince Mendoza?
Yeah, Vince is certainly of the the next generation of guys after the people I mentioned. He is one of the front runners for sure. His
stuff is really different.
He's got a big voice. He's a wonderful musician. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Jim McNeely is another person. Wonderful.
Oh, Jim McNeely. Yeah.
Maria Schneider, of course, beautiful orchestrator. There's a lot of great. Giacomo. What is this guy's name? He lives in London. Really interesting big band guy whose name escapes me right now. Not Giacomo. Shoot, I'm bad with names, but I have a bunch of his recordings. They're really unusual. Some of the writers in Europe are wonderful. You know, they're doing different things.
Bob, has anybody ever approached you for doing movies or anything? Have you ever?
No, not really. I think that's a scene unto itself. You know, I think you have to really have a certain mindset to get into that and really sort of pursue that. And it's not something that I'm particularly interested in. I love to just sit down and write and I like to have a theme and people to write for, but I don't know. I just don't know enough, I think, about orchestrating for movies other than the exposure I've had through playing on some movie soundtracks. And it seemed like very high tension, high stress situations. And I'm not a big fan of that. I did a little bit of TV writing back in the 80s, and that was stressful enough. I mean, it was, having to write and not sleep for several days, and it's just not for me.
They dump the project on you. Let's say the TV show airs on Saturday, and they come to you on Friday afternoon and say, okay, now we need these cues, kind of thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, the thought of having a 90-piece orchestra in a room and having a director go, you got to re-record such and such, and nothing is written, I mean, that I would have nightmares about that scenario. I don't know. It's just not for me. But I can appreciate the people that do that well. And I love watching a movie with a great soundtrack. I mean, I'm in awe of that for sure.
There's a great documentary called Score.
Yeah, you've mentioned that before.
About the movie scoring business. It's really super interesting. You'd probably really like it. Yeah, everybody out there would like it who's listening.
Yeah.
And I think you can find it on Netflix now. So if you have Netflix, it's just sitting there.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check that out.
I got on a little bit of a rant today with somebody, and I was saying, the general public don't really understand what the world would be like without music. And there are so many things that we do, so many places we go where we hear music unconsciously. It's just always there. What would happen if that was all just taken away?
Yeah. And another question I would pose is, what would happen if music education was more comprehensive in grade schools? If young listeners were taught, the fine points of music, what to listen for, you'd have a much more sophisticated listening audience as people grew up. And in fact, you experience that in many parts of Europe, where music is a much more integral part of daily life. I mean, not necessarily in the public school, but every little town at one point had a music school that people took part in. So music was a real integral part of the culture there. I mean, it's changed over time, of course, like everywhere else. But
when you were younger, were there a lot of people taking music? And when I was a kid, almost everybody had a piano, even though it was the Midwest. Almost everybody had a piano in their home.
Yeah, there were music programs in the schools,
right,
and everybody partook. And the whole jazz band tradition started in schools pretty early on. Yeah, I mean, music as the economy waxed and waned, one of the first things to be cut, of course, in the educational scene was the arts. So, and as income disparity became more pronounced, certain factions of society didn't have music education and others did, which is a total drag. I mean, we need to really focus on education. I mean, that's the foundation of having a better society.
Yeah, and just, do you think it's important to get the different sounds of music into young ears? Do you think? I mean, I had that experience because I had a really great listening upbringing by my brothers and my parents, playing all kinds of different stuff.
Yeah, yeah, that's ideal, of course. But
and I've noticed as kids kind of get older and they become out, in their later teens, their ears just aren't willing to open up to new sounds.
Right.
Or do you think that's true? There's exceptions.
Yeah,
but,
yeah. I mean, the earlier you start with anything, the more of an impact it will have. Sure.
Because sometimes I kind of feel bad for people who can't hear beautiful, rich harmonies that textures like in big band tunes, or just the stuff you guys even do in the Jackets. Between a lot of those tunes now, you and Russ write together.
We write primarily individually, but the final process involves all four of us getting our hands on the music and changing things as we see fit, as an ensemble. So in some ways, yes, we write collaboratively, but the initial idea generally comes from one person.
And who's playing bass? You still have
Dane Alderson.
Dane Alderson's still playing.
Yeah.
Amazing
musician.
He's amazing. He's ridiculous. Yeah. One of the most freshest, as a soloist too, one of the freshest soloists I've heard on bass in a long time.
Yeah.
He really has a voice.
He does it all. And he's, I always like telling the story of when we auditioned Dane. We found him on YouTube actually in a video, and invited him to come and play with us. We sent him 15 songs. He memorized them, but not only did he memorize them, when we did the run through before the concert, he was going, Bob, I think you're playing a wrong note in bar 3 of the bridge. He was actually he was reteaching us the music. I mean, it was so stunning. This guy just he impressed us so from note one. It was quite remarkable.
And he's from Australia?
Australia, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
We had another question. Armin Boyd wanted to know, did you play on the Thad Jones Mel Lewis Big Band live at the Village Vanguard? Were you on that record?
No.
No, wasn't because
there were a couple done there. You mean like the Monday Night record back in the 60s, or which one are you talking about?
I think he's talking about actually Thad Jones, Mel Lewis, not the Vanguard band.
No. I played on a Mel Lewis and Friends record, or I forget what it was called, but it was Mel Lewis, Bob Brookmeyer, and Clark Terry.
I know that.
Did you played on that.
Did you ever play Morning Reverend solo recorded?
No.
So there you go. No, that wasn't him.
It was. I'm not sure if it was the Monday Night record. It would have been Eddie Daniels, and maybe I don't know. I'm not sure who it would have been back then.
Eddie must have been hanging out there in the 70s and 80s.
He was. I got to play with him a little bit, and then I would see him on record dates and jingles and stuff, and he would do a funny thing. That guy's a virtuoso. He's a wonderful musician. But we'd show up for a jingle, and he'd take out whatever instrument he was playing, and I would I'd be putting whatever I was playing together, and I'd hear coming from Eddie, I'd hear this thing just utter abject brilliance, just like, and I'd look over and he'd be looking at me going, and I would almost pee in my pants and just think, there's no point in even putting my instrument together. I think I'm just going to go home now. It was so intimidating. I mean, this guy was just ridiculous. Just a great player on every instrument.
Yeah, I know. He's such a tech. Some guys just have that thing to just be able to play at warp 10. And
Brecker was like that too.
Yeah, Brecker was like that.
Yeah,
Parker was like that too.
Yeah. But it didn't just fall out of the sky. Those guys worked really hard.
Yeah.
A lot goes into being able to do that.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times people don't really understand what it takes to become that good of a musician. Talking with Ralph Humphrey, and he was talking about the passion he had when he started to be able to play and practice all the time. And horn player and all musicians, in order to really achieve that, when they come out and you hear that stellar performance, is hours and hours of passionate practicing, because it's their craft and what they want to do.
That's exactly right.
And they're, to be able to get to that point where, like Eddie, I love his clarinet playing, the sound of his clarinet, and all the time it took to get to the level you are, and your hours of playing. And I think sometimes non-music, I'm only speaking for non-musicians, they don't really understand all that goes into it. I'm just an observation for people to say, yeah, that guy, he just jumped up there and just started playing.
Yeah, I don't think it's only just playing an instrument either. I mean, it's just having a total comprehension of music, which involves doing a lot of listening, analyzing, knowing, the big picture, in terms of stylistically being varied, just knowing what the inspiration is behind certain musics, knowing about literature, knowing, about social issues, knowing, what's the juice behind music, knowing the big picture, as I said, and that there's a lot that goes into that. It's not just practicing your instrument, I assure you. Yeah.
And it's feeling all the emotions and communication, like you guys have already talked about.
Yeah. So it's a lot about emotion, for sure.
When you were a young kid, did anybody ever put on some, like, you're 8 years old, somebody puts on Yusef Lateef for you or something like that? Did you ever have that experience?
Later. I didn't really, I guess some of the first jazz I heard was in like around 14 or 15. I remember I got to go to the Village Gate and hear Miles' quintet with Wayne Shorter and Chick Corea, Dave Holland, DeJohnette, and the Thelonious Monk Quartet, 2 bands. I think it was $1.50 to get in, and that turned my head around.
Wow.
Yeah. My brother TJ started buying me albums when I was about 8, and the first one he bought me was Yusef Lateef, and then I think the next year he gave me Love Supreme, John Coltrane.
Yeah.
And I was kind of an odd kid, because I kind of knew that if my brother gave me this music, or I go like, this has to be really, really good music. But I didn't understand it.
Yeah.
But I didn't put it on and go like, oh, I can't listen to that. I would sit there and listen to the whole thing. But I remember, when I was about 16 and I put Love Supreme on, and the first time I oh, I get this now. It moved me.
Yeah.
It really moved me musically.
Yeah. I remember the moment I heard Coltrane, like really heard him, it just turned me around, in a really extreme way. It was one of the Impulse records. I think it was just called Coltrane. It had a blue cover. Out of This World was on there. Inchworm. Miles Mode, and I just I went and bought that LP and I wore it out.
Did you go through a whole phase like I did, where like for 3-4 months I kind of only listened to Coltrane? For like months?
Yeah, I did. I tried to get every Coltrane record there was at a certain point, and I did the same thing with Sonny Rollins and with Joe Henderson too. I went through a big Joe Henderson phase, and then so I had another turning point was when I was on the Buddy Rich band. I was really ill prepared to play with Buddy in certain ways, because he had played with Lester Young and at Jazz at the Philharmonic, and with Coleman Hawkins and with Charlie Parker. And here's this little punk white kid who really hasn't done his homework, trying to sound like some kind of faux Joe Henderson Coltrane imitator. And Buddy got up in my face and he said, "Man, stop playing that Coltrane shit." and I was taken aback at first, but I thought, well, there must be something to this. He wouldn't just say that. And the very next night, he gave me a cassette, which was a recording he did with Lester Young and Nat Cole and him and no bass player. He said, "Here, listen to this." And I listened to it, and I listened to it a lot. And I had this realization at that time, I still had a bunch of homework to do. So at that point, I went out and bought every Lester Young recording I could find, and then went on to Ben Webster and Coleman Hawkins and Dexter Gordon, and really dived into the history of the tenor saxophone, because that's what you got to do.
Yeah. Did you guys have to, like, when Buddy solos, were you told that you had to turn around and watch him solo?
No, but nobody had told me that. I just did it.
I've always noticed that the band always, Buddy solos and the whole band goes like that.
Man, how could you? First of all, it'd be rude to turn your back on such a great musician. But second of all, I was fascinated by his playing every night. I was stunned. It was just amazing every friggin' night. So why wouldn't I look at him?
Well, you're gonna laugh at this. I went and saw Buddy's band at the Great American Music Hall in San Francisco, probably 81, 82, somewhere out there. And there was a bunch of young cats in the band, but he didn't have a lead alto player. And so he asked Don Mintzer to come in and play. Don Mintzer just was filling in on lead alto. And Buddy started to play a solo. And all the guys looked over at the band except Mintzer. Mintzer kept looking. I don't know what those guys had a little friction between them, like they were friends, but yeah. But I remember, I just thought it was pretty noticeable.
Yeah, but Buddy was a beautiful guy. I mean, he had his dark side, as we all do, but very sensitive guy. I mean, I'm forever grateful to him on many levels. But I remember I wrote a suite for the band after I left, and the band was playing in New York somewhere in some new club, and I went. It was packed, and I'm sitting in the back by the door because I had to leave before the set was over. And so unfortunately, it was in the middle of his solo, or towards the end. He's playing a solo, and I quietly, discreetly got up to leave, and he stopped playing and went, "Mintzer, where are you going?" So, I mean, he was a very sensitive person, and he was like any of us, right? We want to be appreciated. I mean, it was kind of knuckleheaded of me to do that. I mean, it couldn't be helped, but I mean, he was a really deep human being and somebody that was really caring.
He was very nice. I met him. He was very nice to me.
Yeah.
I was talking to Mintzer, and he came up and joined the conversation. And I know Eric. You know Eric Miyashiro?
Yeah.
Yeah, Eric just speaks so highly of Buddy.
Yeah.
Because Eric was in the band for a while.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's good to get those stories out because we always get the Buddy, chewing out the band tape, and everybody thinks that's all he is.
Sometimes it was justified, sometimes it wasn't. I mean, you got to remember, this guy was one of the best drummers anywhere of all time. And he expected as much from the people he played with, and a lot of times there was too much alcohol consumption or just not enough paying attention. And I would be annoyed too, He used to say, in fact, he was very explicit about that. He said, "Man, I'm out here busting my ass, I don't want to be a babysitter of you children. I want you guys to step up and play."
Yeah.
He's entitled to that.
What a great experience.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, look, we got to play every night. I got to play every night for 2.5 years. I mean, where do you get to do that now? Maybe you guys come close in Tower, but
you guys didn't take it. You do like
literally.
What was the most longest string of gigs that you did without a day?
3 months. 3 months.
3 months gigging every night.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Holy shit.
And we took. I mean, the only time off was at Christmas. We took 2 weeks off at Christmas. Otherwise, Buddy wanted to work all the time. And I mean, the Willard Alexander Agency, they booked all the big bands. And at that time, there was this huge scene where bands were booked in these high schools. We played in every little podunk town in the country, as well as traveled the world. So, I mean, there were opportunities to play virtually every night.
Yeah, wow.
And that's how you learn how to play.
And
no kidding. Yeah,
that's and all of that sort of thing. It was just old school traveling.
Yeah, it was not no tour bus. I mean, we were on a Greyhound bus, you had your little 2-seat area, and you slept sitting up, and we did a lot of hit and runs. We play in New York and then drive to Chicago, and that's the way it was. But man, I was so grateful to be there. And I started reading. I read a lot of books. I started writing music on the bus. I was getting to hang out with musicians older and more experienced than myself. We had a lot of fun. I got to see the world. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
What's wrong with that?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a great start.
Yeah.
Tom and I did that on the circus. We played every.
Okay. Yeah. Hey, man, a gig's a gig, right?
Well, we had solos, and we opened up solo space in the circus. It wasn't like wasn't like we went. We had a crew. Do you know Eric Jorgensen, who we had on trombone player in L.A.?
Okay.
Eric was on the band, and he did some nice arrangements. He had a great arrangement of Caravan, and we started introducing some Ellington 2 weeks, some cool tunes to certain acts,
Yeah.
Cool, Caravan makes a good backing track for trapeze.
Sure, I can picture it. Yeah. Hey man, a gig's a gig, and if you're playing every night, you're gonna grow as a musician. If you're in a performance situation on a nightly basis, regardless of what the music is, you're gonna get better.
Yeah, I miss it so much, man. It's driving me crazy.
I hear you.
Yeah,
I do too.
Just a quick question around that, because kids today cannot get gigs playing every night like that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And most of their learning experience is just when they get together and jam, or they're watching online. Is there something that they miss from that experience of just being able to play night after night with guys?
Certainly, but I mean the alternative would be to really make a point of being an instigator, to write music, to form some sort of ensemble, and see to it that you get together and play on a regular basis, then go out and try to find performance situations, even if it's in a little dive of a bar or a restaurant. I mean, you have to make it happen. You can't, the age of the freelance musician sitting at home waiting for the phone to ring is pretty much over. Mm-hmm. At least it's changed in its, in its form.
Right.
And the people, I mean, so I think it's always been the case that the people that really thrive in the music scene are those who instigate and, and just come up with situations that, provide playing opportunities and creating music opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Well, fellas, we've been at this for an hour and 40 minutes.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
It went by pretty quick.
It went by pretty quick. And this has been one of the best shows we've done. I mean, it was the information and all the stories so far. I mean, this has been incredible.
Well, I'm glad you think so.
Well, no. And we had like 60, 70 people dialed in the entire time.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you. Thanks to all of you.
Yeah, I mean your footprint on music, you're leaving already left a very big footprint on jazz music, and you're one of the greats that are of our times.
Absolutely.
Players, arrangers, what you contributed, your body of work, and it's just an honor to know you.
Well, it's an honor to know you, Tom. And, I think the big footprint comes from the fact that I wear a size 14 sneaker, which would inevitably leave a big footprint. But
hey, before I forget, I meant it before, but I heard you like magic, and that and that at one time you lived above
Peter Samuelson.
Well, I grew up with Peter Samuelson.
You did? Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah, that was on 21st Street.
Yeah.
It was a loft building. He was right below me, I think. And he was, in fact, we were in his loft one day. He did a magic show. I think he was just getting started back then. But oddly enough, Marty Ashby, who's the head of MCG, hit me to this magic castle, which is right up the street from where we live, which is like a magic performance space. And my wife always wanted to go there, so we went there, I think for her birthday or something. And it's like a mansion, right? And there's these different rooms with magicians performing in all these different areas. And who do I run into there but Peter Samuelson?
Yeah, you got very good at it too.
Yeah, evidently he's all over the world.
Yeah.
Performing. I hadn't seen him in 40 some odd years.
But he was friends with my older brothers, and he used to hang out because my parents' house was the hangout place. Everybody came over, and I was kind of about 7 years younger than all my older brothers, and
right.
Yeah, everybody used to come over, and that's how I got to know him. And he was starting to do magic then. I remember he did his first. He did one of his first magic shows in my parents' living room.
Right. Wow. I really do like magic. Yeah. I've done two Broadway magic shows. One was with Blackstone, and who was the other guy? Was it a Doug Henning?
Harry Blackstone at the Flint Center back in the late.
Yeah, Henning. I did two of them, but there was this one show we did where this light bulb would go out, a lit light bulb would fly over the pit and go out into the audience and kind of hover around and then go back. And I never to this day could figure out how they did that. Yeah, it was pretty far out stuff. Yeah.
Anyway, I'm glad I remember to say that.
Yeah. Thanks for reminding me, actually. Yeah.
He says hi.
All right.
And well, this has been great fun for me. And I know Tom reminded me that he has to get up like at the crack of dawn and do something in the morning. And he's going to do these like 3-hour marathon hangs that we do sometimes. Sometimes we'll talk for hours.
Yeah, well, it's fun, and there's a lot to talk about, so why not?
Yeah, you got any more stories?
I got tons of stories.
I want to hear one before we go.
Let's see. Let me think. Okay, so here's one.
Okay.
We're with the Buddy Rich Band. We're playing somewhere in the Midwest, and the local newspaper sends a woman to interview Buddy. Buddy's in a bad mood that day, and he blows her off and is very disrespectful, and he cusses her out and walks out of the venue. And I'm sitting there, and this woman's in shock, and I go over to try to console her. And I said, I apologize. Sometimes he just gets that way, and it's nothing personal. And she said, wow, I mean, that really was shocking to me. And I said, yeah, sometimes, he acts like a child, really, between you and me. And unbeknownst to me, she's like writing all this stuff down that I'm saying. I mean, I thought it was off the record, right? And
you got to say
I was saying, sometimes he's a pain in the ass and he acts like a child and he's very unreasonable and, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, so it was just, I went to bed like thinking, oh, Jesus, man, we're going to hear about this tomorrow. I'm quite certain. So we wake up, we get on the bus. The bus pulls up to a different hotel where Buddy's staying. And somebody grabbed a paper and the headline of the article was, Buddy acts like a child. And it was this whole diatribe on, what a drag Buddy Rich is, right? Oh, no. And it was like, uh-oh, man, we're going to hear about it today. So the door to the hotel flies open. Buddy comes storming out, and he jumps on the bus, guns blazing. He's screaming at the band, the top of his lungs for a good 3 minutes. And he suddenly stops on a dime abruptly. And he sort of has this shit-eating grin on his face, and he says, April Fools. And he sits down, and that's the end of it. It was April 1st.
Oh, my God.
And it was a total put-on, the whole thing.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
That was a real representative, experience with Buddy. He was hilarious. I mean, he would play pranks on people and do kind of funny things. I mean, if you had the right mindset, it was really entertaining. A lot of the things he did.
So you all did stuff in the 70s, so we can talk about that now. So I've heard of the story about the smoking the joint with Buddy.
Oh God, yeah.
It's like So Buddy would take a toke, and then the next guy would take a toke, but then you had to hand it back to Buddy before it goes to the next guy.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, my experience with Buddy was, I smoked a little bit of marijuana, but Buddy was like a serious, studied viper. I mean, he would smoke really strong weed, and I went over. He was always high. Yeah, always. If he wasn't high, he was cranky. But I went over to his apartment. He wanted me to write something and wanted to talk about it. And he kept handing me this joint. And I mean, I took a few tokes, and man, I was done. Man, I was seeing flying elephants at that point in time. And Buddy kept handing it back, going, "Here," And I was like, "No, thank you." No. "Here, what's the matter? What are you, a wimp? Here." I was like, "Buddy, really, I can't. And that was the beginning of the end of my drug day. I just thought, man, this is not for me.
Man. Did he play most of the time? Was he stoned most of the time when he was?
Yeah. I mean, he wouldn't be the first jazz musician
that is true.
Smoked pot all day. I mean, Louis Armstrong was another one.
Right.
As much energy and as kind of seemed kind of slightly high strung. I think that just he could do that. Somebody could do pot.
I think if you're doing it on an ongoing basis, it doesn't affect you quite as dramatically. I mean, some people. I mean, you got to practice getting loaded to be that loaded. I mean, that famous Zoot Sims line. Somebody asked him, "So how do you play so good when you're drunk?" He said, "Practice drunk." And I mean, there was something to that with Buddy, but in hindsight, that's one of the regrets I have. I mean, the drug thing, it was just what everyone did, and I was sort of caught up in it, but it was very counterproductive. And life without all that stuff is so much clearer and more meaningful, and there's a lot more connection, without all that stuff.
Oh yeah, it was sort of part of the times of the 70s too. I mean, caught up in it too, and now it's just. I'm so glad now the atmosphere is way different in the music business. If you actually, most people are pretty much straight ahead, and when you run into somebody who's got a substance abuse problem, it seems kind of rare.
Yeah, it's rare. It's sad. It's really it's too bad. It's too bad.
Because musicians still sit around, drinking, snorting, and smoking.
Yeah.
Like they used to.
I mean, look to live a full, enriched life, particularly as an artist. You need to be clear and focused and disciplined, and that's the antithesis of being stoned, to my way of thinking. So one more Jocko story. Okay. So we're playing in Toronto, right? A place called Ontario Place. There's thousands of people, and I'm playing a bass clarinet solo. My eyes are closed. I'm caught up in the heat of the moment, and all of a sudden I hear the crowd cheer, and I'm thinking, great, man, they're responding to what I'm playing. Everything's really firing on all cylinders. So after the concert, we go back in the dressing room, and Randy says, "Do you know what happened during your bass clarinet solo?" I said, "No, what happened?" He said, "Jocko did a backflip, and the audience started cheering." And here I was thinking I played something so totally hip, but it wasn't that at all. It was Jocko somehow. He was playing, while he's playing, did a backflip and landed on his feet. I don't know how.
Oh my
God. I mean, it was behind me, so I didn't see it happening.
But if he hadn't.
Great moments in jazz.
Man. How did he do that? That's
I don't know. He was a very athletic cat, He would do all sorts of crazy stuff like that.
So the 80s, all of those sessions in New York City, those were pretty wild too, from what I hear.
Yeah, they could get kind of wild. There was a lot of imbibing happening, but everyone took care of business. I mean, that was a given, I never saw anybody so inebriated they couldn't play. Everybody showed up and did what they had to do. period. You know, otherwise you wouldn't get called back.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. And some of the stuff that came out of those sessions were some of the best playing ever.
Yeah, it was a very high level.
Yeah.
You know, it was really something to behold, for sure.
Yeah, Bob, you know how to make a musician complain, right?
No.
Get him a gig.
Oh, God.
You know how to make a musician cry?
Get him a gig.
Gig away.
Right. Give the gig away. Right.
Oh. Yeah. Hey,
Anyway.
well, you know what? I'm just pointing out the time in case you guys are, how you guys feeling about it?
Well, where are we going to go? I mean, we're
take it till 10. Do you have another? Do you have any like stories with touring with the Jackets that stick out?
Yeah. There's several. There was one in particular. We used to play at the Blue Note in Tokyo, and there was an elderly Japanese gentleman who apparently he would come and sit at the same table every night, like of a 6-night engagement, drink a fair amount of scotch. And when the band would play this particular tune, which was Geraldine, this very sort of emotional, pretty ballad, this guy would start bawling profusely. And I mean, I heard the story, you know, I mean, sort of before we ever got there. And I think Jimmy Haslip said, you know, when we go to play the Blue Note, you're going to see this guy sit right in front of where you're standing. And when we start playing Geraldine, you know, there's an intro with just tenor and piano, and he's going to start crying every time. And I didn't think much of it. And anyway, so now we're at the Blue Note, first opening night, and we're getting ready to start Geraldine, and Jimmy goes, psst, psst. So I'm like, oh yeah, Geraldine. And so I start playing the intro, you know, and totally exposed, you know, tenor playing, just me and Russ. And sure enough, I mean, within seconds, this guy, like, it's like a river starts flowing out of this guy's eyes. And I just started to lose it, you know. And I mean, of course, when you're laughing, trying to play the saxophone, this vibrato suddenly appears. And it was not pretty. It was rather ugly, actually. And I was just like, God, get me through this, you know, without totally falling apart.
And it was every night.
It was every night. Yeah, pretty much.
Like
Oh,
yeah. That was one story. So here was another story. So we're playing in Club. Did you ever play Club Benet in Sayreville, New Jersey? It was a mafia joint in Sayreville, New Jersey, and I played gigs. I played Jerry Vale's show there way back, and there were, you know, sort of mafia related kind of acts played in there. But in the 90s, they had like a fusion policy for some reason, like one night a week. So the Jackets played there. And so we played our set, and we're in the dressing room on the break between sets. And this couple barges into the dressing room, and the guy says, you know, you're our favorite band, and tonight is our anniversary, and you didn't even play our favorite tune. And furthermore, I'm never going to come to one of your shows again, and we're never going to buy one of your CDs again. Let's go, Martha. And they storm out of the room. And we sort of looked at one another like, whoa, that's interesting. It was one of the times I felt more like a record player than a musician. You know, it was so impersonal and weird, but it was revealing at the same time. It was just like, so, okay, you know, we didn't even, yeah, right.
You were supposed to know what their song was, didn't
you? I guess weeks, months in advance, and we should have prepared it and announced it, but we didn't know. So.
No. Hey, well, you mentioned something earlier about going to the Catskills. Did you do any of those shows in the Catskills?
I did many, yeah.
What were those like back then?
They were great. I mean, there were great entertainers back then. You know, some of the comedians were hilarious. I mean, you know, I played at the Concord Hotel, at Grossinger's, at the Laurels. I did, you know, that was available work back when I was, you know, in high school into college. And
you were doing it when you were in high school?
Yeah, just out of high school. The summer of my senior year, I got a gig at the Concord Hotel.
Mm.
in Kiamisha Lake, New York. And here's another story. I played this electronic wind instrument, and so we played at one of these wineries. Right there. If it's a winery, it's pretty much a given. Some drinking is going to be happening. And so after the concert, we get on a little table and we sign CDs. And this woman comes by and, said something that I would hear frequently, which is, what was that thing you were playing? And it's like, well, it's called an electronic wind instrument, Yeah, well, I don't like it, I can appreciate that, it's something, it's a little bit of a departure from playing the saxophone. So you should play the saxophone. I don't like that instrument. It's like, what am I supposed to say at that point? Well, I'm sorry you don't like it, but I happen to like it. And, I think I'm going to continue playing it despite your dislike. But, I was polite. But I just thought it was kind of.
Next time I have an idea, I don't like it, you should just go, yeah, you're right. I don't like it too. Thank you. I can't play it no more.
Yeah.
See what, just.
Yeah.
It's a lose-lose situation either way.
A lot of times, like, what is that thing? Is that a clarinet? No, it's not a clarinet.
I love the iwi. I love all, it's a very expressive synthesizer, man.
It can be. It certainly can be. I mean, the trick with the iwi is to not blow too hard.
Okay.
If you blow soft, then you have room to increase the volume and timbre through blowing hard. But if your mean volume, very much same as on the saxophone, if that mean volume is mezzo piano, then you got room to crescendo and to open up, to a brighter sound. You get a lot more variety timbrally.
Yeah.
Now, not every musical situation allows for that, but I mean, generally in the situations I play in, I try to not be full on blowing, because you get a lot more variety that way.
Yeah. So much of I know it's like when I notice how much softer I play when I practice and play, and then but when I play in tower, everything's so so high energy, and the horn section's just blowing. You end up, it's like all of a sudden you get caught up in the heat of the moment, and we're all blowing,
Yeah. Well, you guys sound great, and I mean that the music calls for that level of intensity, on a consistent basis. So that's what you do.
We have a lot of ballads, so.
Yeah. But it's funny, as a big band orchestrator, I found, in conjunction with being a player, as I aged and got, more, I don't know, clear on what I wanted to do, I started writing lower for the brass, softer, more texturally, because that was the environment I wanted to play in. My earlier big band stuff was a lot more full on and loud and, punchy. The newer stuff has a lot more dynamic variety, for the simple reason I like playing that way.
Yeah.
And as a composer, you have this wonderful ability to write yourself into the picture you want to be in.
Oh yeah.
That's a big
one. I never thought of that way, but that's actually, yeah. No wonder you like composing so much.
Oh yeah.
Because you're playing on most everything you write.
Well, yeah, and the way you want, in a way that's befitting to the way you think about playing.
And you got any new Yellowjackets tunes in the works, or new recordings in the works?
Yeah, we're sort of circling the wagons. So we need to start thinking about the next record. I got a couple of snippets of ideas of things. I mean, I've done several WDR projects, and there's a lot of residual material that I haven't used that's sitting there that, some of which might inevitably become Yellowjackets material. So we'll see. Writing is, the more you write, sort of the more fluid it becomes. And, I'll be out walking my dog, and I mean, I don't know if you could see this, but this is I have a little scratch sheet. It was just, a bass line that I was hearing, and two different bass lines, one just rhythms and one notes that I heard. And I was, sort of walking, at this certain tempo and sort of hearing this thing. So ran home and jotted them down. So those are two germs or ideas for perspective tune.
I got to start doing the John Williams always said, just write 4 bars of music every day. He said 4 bars of music, and it doesn't have to be good. And I would think for someone like you, since you're writing all the time, things do pop into your head. Because you're writing all the time, walking the dog and get an idea. And I think I've heard that it just starts to be a thing.
Yeah,
you start
but not only that, Tom, but anybody can do this. I think when we first start writing, I know this was my situation. I was glued to the piano. I felt like I needed an instrument in my hands to come up with musical ideas. But I eventually realized, after I got to a point where I had played enough piano and sort of was able to internalize what I had, been working on piano, I didn't need the piano anymore. And in fact, it kind of freed me from being shackled to, my technique on the piano. And I could imagine things that a piano might play, or for that matter, just imagine what an ensemble would play. And, in general terms, perhaps, maybe not always specific notes, but if you get in the habit of doing that, just sit quietly and imagine some music. You're going to hear stuff. And the more you do that, the more specific the things you hear will become, because you just become more articulate in that way of doing things.
Can you now write when you're composing? Can you just write from your head, hearing, and just write it on paper?
Yeah, that's what I do. Although I use Sibelius, some guys prefer to write onto score paper first and then input into Sibelius. I don't have time, honestly. I need to get right into Sibelius, and I find I think what you do need as a prerequisite is some sense of what, real players do and what it sounds like. You can't rely just on the playback from Sibelius, say, but you can rely on the playback from Sibelius just to see how different parts interact, rhythmically and so on. Sonically, it's not a great representation, so I wouldn't rely on that per se, but just the way things lay, I find Sibelius is helpful to try audition things.
But for you already know what it sounds like. You've been doing this for years.
I have a pretty good idea, beforehand.
Yeah.
I mean, I've written over 600 big band pieces, so by now I have some idea of how that works.
I want to ask you how many big band tunes you've actually written.
Somewhere in that, between 500 and 600, I would say.
And everybody out there, they're all for sale, probably on your website.
Not all. I mean, no. But some of them, I mean, there's a lot of them on my website. The ones I can't keep up with. I mean, I wrote 40 or 50 arrangements per year the last couple of years. So
how does it take you to do an arrangement?
It varies. I take my time. And generally with the WDR, I'm working on 10 pieces simultaneously. So, I'll work on one for a while, then I find it interesting, then move to the next. And, I'm working on 9 pieces right now. I'm sort of 95% there on all 9. So now I got to go back and, just really scrutinize everything and make sure all the voicings are good, that I haven't overwritten, that dynamics are making sense and so on. Inevitably I wind up changing things.
Mm-hmm.
It's a long drawn out process. I prefer a long process because, there's a lot of detail in these things and you want to get it just right.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, you're creating a work, you're creating art.
Yeah.
So and you're not doing it for a movie or anything. You're doing it kind of for yourself.
Yeah. That's right.
And for WDR too.
Yeah.
But they just want you to do what you want to do. They're not telling you what to do.
No. no, they trust my musical judgment, I think, and it's tried and proven. Just the amount I've worked with the band, I know how to write for those guys too.
It's so funny because I get asked, if I wasn't doing Tower, what other gigs I would want to do, and I always say WDR big band in Germany.
Yeah,
that's a gig I'd love to have. And the
that's
other
a
one,
sweet gig. Yeah,
NDR, right? The one in Hamburg.
Yeah, there's 3 great bands in Germany. HR is in Frankfurt, NDR is in Hamburg, and WDR. They're all good, excellent bands.
It's just amazing they have that culture where they
right. I mean, yeah, you'd think America would get wise and sort of learn something from that culture over there. I mean, it's arts and humanities are revered and practiced with some sense of urgency and regularity there. But it's, what can you say? It is what it is. But I'm grateful that I've had the opportunity to work all over the world. And I mean, I wish more Americans had the opportunity to travel and see what other people do. I think that would really change people's perception in a big way. But a lot of people rely on what they hear from the media about other countries, and they really don't know what's going on.
They don't have a clue,
and that's unfortunate.
Around the when the United States invaded Iraq, back when Bush was president, I was sitting in a diner up in Napa, of all places, which is not really the Bay Area. It's kind of, but I was sitting there and I was just grabbing a bite before going to sound check, and the 3 employees, they were talking about France wasn't back in the U.S. invading in Iraq, and they were talking about people remember when they said, don't call them French fries, call them Liberty fries. Do you kind of remember that?
I do.
You remember that?
Yeah.
So they're talking, and I finally said, hey, I can't help but hear what you guys are saying. And I was just thinking, I said, have any of you ever been to France? And none of them had ever been to France. And they go like, well, you really need to go to France before you pass judgment on, what their government's doing. And they have a point, and you go like, France is one of the most coolest places to visit. And if you went there, it would change the way you think about this.
Yeah. I would also suggest reading some history books about Europe's involvement in 2 major world wars, and why there might be some reluctance to get involved in yet another world war. I mean, there's a lot to this life we're in, and I think the more one learns about the big picture, the more understanding we would possibly be. I mean, from my perspective, the only thing that will save us is a sense of love and collaboration. And the one-upmanship we're experiencing right now is really criminal, and it just goes against every cell in my body. I mean, it's not what I was taught by my parents. It's not what I learned growing up in the 60s. It has nothing to do with being an artist or a member of society. So we've been really derailed in a great way, and it's unfortunate. And I pray and hope that we can right this ship and get back on track. And I mean, if it gets it's already as bad as one can imagine, and hopefully that will wake people up and maybe help to initiate some level of change that will get us back on track.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more.
Me neither.
You just said.
Anyway, maybe we should end it there, guys.
We've done 2 hours and 10 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah.
A steady group. Thanks everybody for tuning in.
Yes, thank you.
Shout out to Roxy over there in Manila. Roxy's over there. We have some people from Europe watching. We have people from Asia watching.
Tom,
pretty great.
How many people are tuned in on your watch party?
I had it up to it hit 80 something
And
at one point.
mine was like at 70 something too. So
That's not total people though. That's just at one time.
Yeah.
People listen at one time.
So I'm going to play out something from anything, Bob, that you think we should play. I have any of your big band tunes or any of your quartet stuff.
How about The Rite of Spring by Igor Stravinsky? I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Whatever you like, Jeff. I'm not partial.
You know, the one song that I always think of that I always want to be able to hear again is Pools. You know, off of one of your, isn't that Pools off of?
That's not me. That's not me.
Who did that song, Pools?
That was Steps, or Don Grolnick wrote it. Michael Brecker played on most of the recordings of that tune.
Somebody did a big band arrangement of it, is what you're thinking.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah,
it wasn't me. I don't think.
600. You might be a little foggy.
Who knows?
Yeah,
I don't think it was me.
No, okay. I'm easily confused. I'm just like, look at I
play what's that tune? Like a River. Is it off a River Waltz? Waltz off. Isn't that album called
Like a River? That's the name of the CD. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Waltz.
Like a River. Okay, so
5/4 off that album. What's the name of that tune?
Azure Moon. Yeah, that's a cool tune.
Off Like a River. That's one of my favorite.
Yeah, that's a beautiful tune. That's a Russ Ferrante composition.
And you did River Waltz, though, right? That's your tune.
No, I don't know what that is.
Okay, so Like a River is the name of the album?
Yes.
Okay, so Bob Mintzer.
Anyway, what do you have? Just play whatever you have handy.
You pick one, man. Hey, Chef's choice.
So we can get out of here. Just pick something.
You got your horn handy? Maybe you could just play something for us.
I could, actually.
Oh, let's do that. Let's do that.
Okay.
I'm all thumbs on trying to dig up a tune.
I hope my neighbors don't freak out. But
you're in the house. This is a treat.
Yeah.
All right, here we go.